Did you put the link?
No. Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thank you very much for joining us. Today, we're going to talk about how to build strong relationships, which is really important, particularly through these difficult times that everyone's going through at the moment. So all relationships go through phases. And at the moment, people are finding that it's emotionally and financially and physically a huge strain and lots of pressure on them. And what we realize is that everyone goes through a really rough spot. So do take heart and realize that great relationships don't happen by luck. We want to give you some specific skills and actions that strengthen our relationships. So now I want to introduce Wynand. Hi, Wynand. Welcome.
Hi. Good morning, Bridgette. How are you going?
I'm good, thank you. I'm great. So you came to our shores from South Africa in 2018, and
That's right.
you've just published a book on strengthening relationships called Connection: A Journey Towards Intimacy. So great. Have you got that book there?
I do actually. So here it is, all the way from South Africa, actually, because I had these printed there, and this was in 2018. So yeah, it's good. It's been 3 years. I do feel like New Zealand is a place I can call home. My wife and I, and we actually had our son, Jonah, who's now 13 months in New Zealand. So he's born Kiwi. So proud of that.
Fantastic. So you're a coach and an author and a speaker, and you're passionate about equipping and encouraging couples to build strong, healthy, and happy relationships. And this is why it made sense for you to take up the executive director role at Family Life last year. And as you said to me, Family Life New Zealand exists to strengthen families and help couples stay happily married.
That's right. And they've been at it we've been at it for the last 30 years. I only joined in September last year, of course. But our heart and passion is really strengthening marriages that help strengthen families. And we believe if we get that piece right, it actually just solves so many challenges that we face on a societal level.
Great. Fantastic. Okay, so let's have a chat about how people can strengthen their relationships at this really difficult time, being boxed in together and for who knows how long. So one point that I want to make, that people have got to make their relationship a top priority. Let's visualize it, liken it to a pot plant. If you don't feed your pot plant and nurture it and give it love, then that'll end up dying. So, you've got to make it a top priority of your time and energy to put into your current relationship. Otherwise, you will find that over time, it becomes very, very difficult potentially to stay together. Yeah. And the second thing I want to talk about is a lot of us have quite big issues with listening to each other. We hear things, but we don't actually listen. And
just on that note, Bridgette, one of my good friends and philosophy students at university used to say, some people often think they listen when they were merely rearranging their prejudices.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. There is a big difference between hearing and listening, and people have got to be fully present. I mean, we've all got time at the moment to be able to, go and sit in a room together and have 20 minutes and actually sit there and talk to each other, not playing on your phones, not being distracted by children, and talk about your relationship and how you potentially could improve that. You begin, if you're listening, you begin to understand what the point of view that your partner's coming from, okay, whether that's good or bad. And make it clear that you will be hearing and you will be understanding what they've got to say. You might be saying, in the past, I haven't made a good job of listening to what you're saying, but I do now want to understand who you are and what matters to you, and I will keep listening as long as it takes.
Yeah. That's good. I think the challenge with listening is twofold. It's and I like to liken communication to if you think of a projector and a screen. So you go to a film studio, you have a big screen in the front, and it's probably a bit different nowadays with digital, but definitely a few years back it was still a projector at the back of the room and a screen at the front of the room, and the screen doesn't actually have any information. The screen reflects the information that the projector is throwing at it, and without those two elements you won't be able to actually see a story or watch a movie. You need two elements involved, and I think communication is a lot like having a projector and a screen. Obviously, the projector being the one talking, and the screen being the one not only listening but actively reflecting back to the speaker what they hear.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Now, if anyone's got any questions, just send us a message, because we were happy to answer any questions that you've got about your relationships. So feel free to interrupt at any time. We will continue to talk about how you're going to strengthen your relationship. So one of the things too that I wanted to talk about too is trust, because I think trust is a really, really fundamental issue when you're in a relationship with somebody. I want to talk about people need to be true to their words. So that when you say that you're going to do something, you actually do it. And that means that your partner's going to trust that this is true, that you're going to carry out what you say you're going to do. It's okay for you to change your mind, but it'll take time for your partner to catch up. And this allows for your partner to grow and change with you. What are your thoughts on trust, Wynand?
Yeah, well, trust obviously takes time to build, right? And unfortunately, you can put a lot of effort into the trust bucket and then break that trust bucket with one silly act of, betrayal, or, I think in terms of building trust, there's this great model by, I think it was Eric Byrne, who talks about the trust cycle, which starts out with the fact that you need to express a need for that person in the relationship to meet the need. And if the need is met, the trust cycle is built. Okay, so it starts with communicating, hey, I need something from you. And then the other person has the opportunity to respond. And the more trust cycles you can complete, they actually use this in child psychology, where they say a baby would cry. A cry would be the most basic expression of a need. Now, a baby doesn't really know how to say, hey, I'm hungry, or hey, I'm tired, or hey, I need this or that. So they only have one means of communication, which is to cry. But fundamentally, they understand that if I need something, if I want something from my partner, well, not my partner, my mother in the child's case, I need to express my need. Okay. So if we start by expressing our needs and our partner meets the need, trust is built. If our partner doesn't meet the need, trust is broken. But unfortunately, we often miss that part. We expect certain things from our partners, which we often fail to voice, and they don't meet the need, which we haven't voiced, and in our own minds, we don't trust them. So trust is a two-way street. We need to give someone that opportunity to build trust with you. And then, they have the opportunity to listen and to actually fulfill on that trust cycle. So it gets built cycle over time.
Yeah, absolutely. That's so true. You can't just, if the trust has been broken, you cannot expect that you're going to be able to get all of that trust back instantly. One of the other things that's really important, that when you're in a relationship and you have your ups and downs, and particularly like at the moment, it's really important if your partner, because you're at home, both of you at the moment, are together, and he or she goes and does something nice for you, without you asking them to, take time to actually express your appreciation of what they've done for you. Don't take people for granted, and be really grateful what they've done for you, because it actually ends up making your life better and easier. When you don't take time to express your appreciations for your partner, that will definitely affect the relationship, because people will feel like that perhaps, you're worthless potentially, or you're not willing to put in the same amount of effort that they are into the relationship. Yeah. What are your thoughts, Diane?
Yeah, I think it's easy to become so focused on the wrong and what people do wrong, what frustrates you about your partner, that we often fail to just show appreciation to the things that they do. In the book, I actually write about a story where this mom had her children were getting married, and what she did as a wedding gift is she went ahead and opened up a bank account for them, like a joint bank account, and she deposited $2,000 as a wedding present. So here you go, guys, this is for you. Congratulations from me on being married. There's one requirement that comes with this gift and this deposit. I want you to have this account, and with every significant moment in your life, go and make a deposit and write down what the significant event was. So they went ahead and they did it. The first was they got married. They bought a house. They had their first, child. And so they would keep track of all of these highs in their relationship. And each time they'd go and make a deposit. Anyways, as the year went by, things didn't work out as they had hoped for and envisioned, and they actually decided, hey, we want to end this relationship. So I spoke to a few people, spoke to the mom, and the mom said, okay, so you don't want to continue this relationship. Well, that's okay, but before you make that decision, you obviously don't want a broken relationship and have that memory of the broken relationship in that bank account. So why don't you go ahead and draw all that money from that bank account and go and spend it? Anyways, the daughter then said, okay, yep, I'll do that. So she went ahead, going to the bank account, wanting to draw the money. And eventually that afternoon came home. So the husband asked, so what happened? Did you do it? Did you spend it? And she said, no, I couldn't. So she gave him the bank card and the book and said, you go ahead, you spend it. I don't want to spend it. Obviously being a bit torn at the relationship and where they are today. Anyways, he went ahead, and later that day he came back and he gave her the booklet. And as she opened the booklet, she read in there and she asked, did you spend it? But he just remained quiet. And as she read that booklet, she saw that there was a new deposit made in there. And
Right.
So he actually stood there and as she read the deposit, she started crying because the note that he made next to that deposit was, the day I nearly lost my relationship or lost my marriage.
Right. Wow.
And so the mere act of him and her both going to the bank and reading through all those deposit slips and remembering those highlights that they shared over the years actually meant so powerful that they were able to let go of all their differences and say, hey, this is really important to us. The moral of the story, and the reason I share that story today, Bridgette, is it's easy for us to find evidence for everything our partner does wrong or every area they frustrate us. But we often forget the highlights. We remember the bad, we don't always remember the good. So unless we have a method of intentionally recalling those good memories and keeping track of them, we often just forget about them. And that's the memories we can bank on in difficult times. I actually call this relationship insurance.
Right.
So taking out relationship insurance is like making regular deposits into a memory bank, something that you use to remind yourself in the tough times, what did the good times look like?
Yeah, sounds wonderful. Sorry, people have been wanting to join the Facebook link, so I've been helping them, been messaging me wanting to join. You have to excuse me for trying to get them on board so they can listen to what we're talking about. So my apologies, everybody, for that if I seemed a little bit distracted. People are really wanting to listen, so that's wonderful. That sounds. Relationship insurance that's a really great analogy. I think that's fantastic. What else do you think is really important when you're trying to strengthen your relationship, Wynand?
Yeah, I think well, many things. I think where do you want me to start? But just coming back to what you said before about listening, I think there's a key in there where oftentimes, and you might probably tell me a bit more than about this, Bridgette, with your experience and the work that you do. But I think oftentimes when people feel like they've come to the end of their ability to I guess stay in a relationship, it's not really a one-time thing. It's something that's built up over time. And very often, it's because someone in the relationship doesn't feel appreciated, or a person in the relationship doesn't feel their needs have been met in some way, or they may feel that they never get listened to. So the communication is so important. I mean, sometimes just taking an intentional 10 or 15 minutes to have a discussion and just to check in, say, hey, are you okay? What can I do to lift you? What can I do to encourage you? What would make your life easier today? Simple question like that can really just show your partner, hey, I care, I'm here for you, and you're not alone.
Well, absolutely, because I think particularly when we're not in lockdown, people are rushing around, with the logistics of day to day and how busy it can be with children. And, generally most couples, quite a number of couples are both working. So, it can be these days are very, very stressful as it is without extra challenges. So you really do have to be there for each other. You do have to be best friends, and you do have to be soulmates, and be able to actually take some time. And that's why it's really important to have date nights and actually have time apart from, from children that are hanging off your hip or demanding this and that and something else. It's really important that you do that, because it's very easy to lose yourself and become really quite distant, I think so. And that comes to an aspect where people really do need to daydream together. When you first get together with somebody, you're talking about your hopes and your dreams for the future and how you're going to build your lives together. And as I've said, we get caught up in the grind of daily life, and you need to take time to daydream and explore what possibilities you both hope for the future. You make goals and plans to support each other to live out your dreams. And, I think, that probably the operative word there is having hope. Having hope, you're going through a really difficult time, that please ensure that you give it a go. You try everything to fix your relationships, whether it's the tools that you employ, whether it's professionals that you employ, like the likes of both of us, for example, whether it's couples counselling. You've really got to give it a go, because at the end of the day, in the future, you don't want to have regrets that you have left a relationship which you could have made work. What are your thoughts, Wynand?
Yeah, I used to have an inscription on my screen, my keyboard screen, when I was working at finishing my book. Anyone who's written a book would know that it's no easy task. There's a lot of work that goes into it, and they always talk about the messy middle. Any creative project, any life event, anything any goal that you're trying to achieve will always have the beginning phase where you're all excited and it's a big dream and you've got a lot of energy to pursue this dream. Then you move on to the messy middle, and this is always the area where things aren't what you imagined they would be when you were dreaming about this project. Okay. But here you are in the messy middle, and to get to the end, to get to your goal of staying successfully married in this case, you really need to go through that messy middle. And the messy middle is the part that really takes work. Now, if you're willing to go through the messy middle, you can get there. But coming back to before, when I was writing my book, what would help me get through that messy middle is I had this inscription on my screen, and it said, if you want it bad enough, you will make it happen.
Yeah.
And so maybe that's a motto that you could pick up in terms of making your relationship go the extra mile or making your relationship last. If you want it bad enough, you will make it happen. It's a philosophy where I stop putting the responsibility for my happiness on my partner. It's not their job to make me happy. All right. It's
Yeah.
not I love you because. There's no because in I love you. I love you is a choice. I love you is an act of service. I love you is saying, hey, I choose you. I focus on you. I choose to focus on loving you for the rest of my life. Now, yes, it's true. Not everyone can keep making that choice all the time. But if you really want to, you'll find a way. And I always say we've got a lot of tools and ideas and practical things that people can do to help strengthen their relationships. But you need to want to. You need to have made a decision. Hey, I actually want to make this work. I mean,
Yeah.
all the relationship tools in the world won't be able to help unless you want to change.
Yeah, absolutely. And carrying on from that is, you've got to, people have got to let go that actually it's their partner's fault and you can fix or change. They have to fix or change themselves. Actually, it's both of you, because your relationship is a living entity, and so there's both of you that need to make changes. No one's perfect, and if you're having a relationship breakdown, then there's obviously issues on both sides that need to be dealt with. So you need to actually focus on changing and improving yourself, and your partner needs to do that as well. And so, what are some of the tools and tricks, Wynand, that you would recommend that people can utilize if they need to be resuscitating their relationships?
Yeah, I think one that I mentioned before is definitely that idea of relationship insurance. But just to elaborate on that, I mean, a bank account and having a joint bank account where you make those deposits and write that down, it's a great idea. But I think in the day and age we live, not many people use banking in that way. What you can do is maybe open up like a joint email address. It's so easy to get a free email address nowadays. And then just every time something positive happens, just send yourself an email to remember. Or maybe open a folder on your computer with photos that remind you of significant events. It might sound a little bit silly or a bit corny right now if I share it in that way, but the power of this is it actually helps us get out of our amygdala. Now, amygdala is the part of the brain, our reptilian brain. They always talk about it. It's that part of your brain that responds to something that's a threat in either fight, flight, or freeze. So if something is a threat, you either fight that thing, or you flee, you run away, or you freeze, you don't do anything. That's our natural instinct. Now, when it comes to relationships, our natural instinct is often to do one of those three things: fight, flight, or freeze. Okay. But what we can do is we can just pause for a moment, that feeling, that animal feeling, animal behavior, because we are actually called to a higher nature of living, that is not on the animal level of fight, flight, or freeze. But us as humans have the ability to stop and think, how do we want to respond? Okay. But that's a bit more difficult than simply reacting in the moment. So the way we do that is by having a memory bank of things that we can draw upon when our emotions are telling us, hey, I really want to fight right now. How can we stop, reflect on the positive, and say, this negative thing right here is nothing compared to all the positives we've experienced. Okay, but the brain doesn't naturally work like that. So I want to encourage you, take out some relationship insurance, whatever that looks like for you. I mean, we take out insurance for our cars. Yeah. We take out life insurance. Many people, we take out a home content insurance. I mean, if we are willing to make a monthly contribution to something as insignificant as a vehicle that transports me from point A to point B, how much more valuable is our relationship, our marriage? Okay. I often compare our weekend to remember getaway. And this is actually a weekend that many people have said has turned around their relationship. They came to us as a last resort, and they've got hope. They left with hope for their relationships. Other people that had a great relationship already said, "Hey, I never knew there was so much more that we could be enjoying in this relationship in terms of just getting to know each other and being intentional about strengthening the connection." But I often liken the investment of coming to a weekend to remember to car insurance, and it's actually less than the amount of money you spend on car insurance. But it's interesting for me how much people are willing to spend on the wedding, and then how little they invest in the relationship, both financially and in terms of their time, to intentionally grow and strengthen their relationship. So I always encourage people, what are you doing? How are you investing in strengthening your relationship?
It's more than just a day that costs you $50,000, the wedding day. You've got to realize that I think, we all get married, and hopefully we would like to think that we're one of those couples that end up having their 50th wedding anniversary. That's all our dreams, isn't it? So in order to do that, you really need to put a lot of work into it.
Now, before we go on to the next thought, you just touched on something, and I've got a question for you, Bridgette. But because in the work you do, you see this a lot, right? But you mentioned 50,000 roughly for a wedding day. Here I am thinking, okay, spend $300 to come to a weekend to remember, and that includes your food. That's not really comparable.
No.
But one other number that I'm interested in is, what is the average cost of a divorce?
Well, it sort of varies, but I would think that on average it costs at least $20,000 to $30,000. Yeah.
And that's no small amount.
No, that's no small amount.
Well,
and my own divorce cost $600,000, unfortunately. So that's hence why I'm doing the work that I'm doing. And my thoughts in terms of I'm certainly not pro-divorce by any stretch of the imagination, hence being a relationship coach. But my thoughts are that if we get together with somebody and we're really serious about that relationship, that at that outset, we actually talk about how things are going to be. It's more than just a prenup. It's actually, so if things do unfortunately go to custard, because nothing's guaranteed in life, is it? But if things do go to custard in your relationship, then you know where you stand with an agreement verbally and in writing as well, which I think actually is something that I want to explore further. Because people actually, when you make a commitment, there are some relationships that can't work, and mine was one of those relationships that was never going to work, unfortunately. However, I have learned from that, and so that's how. What do you think about that, Wynand?
Yeah, and this is the beauty. I mean, even in a relationship, no two people will always agree. But I've learned over the time that I've spent being married, which isn't heaps of time. I've only been married now for 5 years. But I've made a commitment to say, learn from those who went before me. So learning from the people that have been married, for a length of time. But what I've realized is my wife and I actually disagree on many things. We do. But the reality is, if the two of us were the same, then one of us wouldn't be needed in this relationship. Okay. I see marriage as a partnership. And the great thing is we can disagree and still work together towards, I think something we need to realize that would unite us moving forward is a common goal. And so if we have a common goal, something that we're working towards together, then that helps ease out the challenges we deal with. I think You mentioned before, Bridgette, obviously you tried keeping things together, and you guys did end up walking the road of separation. Now, we've never talked about that in detail, I mean, which is fine. But here you are today doing work not only to help people go through that process. I don't want to say as easy as possible, but to actually just minimize the actual impact on them as a person. But not only that, you're also saying, hey, how can we help you think about this before you make that decision? Because once you make that decision, once you sort of go down that rabbit hole, yeah, sure, you could get back together again if that's what you want, but it's not often that you get back from making that decision, which is what I alluded to before, is love is a choice. And this is where many people wouldn't agree with me in this, and that's okay. I mean, we could still talk together, we could still have good conversation without agreeing. The reality is, if people don't agree, our perspectives can broaden. Okay, so I can learn from someone else's perspective, and at the same time, they might be able to learn from something that I share. So for me, and this is probably, so I'm very passionate about relationships and marriage and making it work. For me, I don't see, it's not an option. Like for my wife and I, divorce isn't an option. And sometimes, on a practical level, we would have been able to argue ourselves into going down that route. But I'm glad we didn't. And I'm glad because I've held on to the foundation that I've made a vow to stay with you through thick and thin. This is the thin, and now I'm working through it. And I'm glad that we reached the light at the end of that tunnel, because at the end of the day, our relationship has now strengthened. So every time my wife and I face difficulty or difference, our relationship strengthens by the time we work through that. And if we allowed ourselves the space of mind to envision what separation looks like, we wouldn't have had the capacity to actually work through the creative solution of what staying together looks like. And that's the challenge I'd put to everyone. How does the creative, ambitious, goal-driven person in you find a solution to this challenge that maybe seems unsurmountable at the moment?
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree, because, in the main, unfortunately, when you're facing down the barrel of divorce and separation, more and more divorces and separations are becoming high conflict, and it's a very, very difficult time that people have to go through. It's at the top of the stress continuum, and it really affects everybody, themselves and obviously their family and the wider family, emotionally, physically, and financially, to an extent that people have never felt before. Hence why I work in that area, holding people's hand, being their thinking partner, guiding them through the process, because it's very intricate and it can be very intimidating as well.
Yeah.
So that's.
And I think it's great for someone to have a voice like you in that situation, Bridgette, someone that said, hey, I've actually lived through this, and there are ways of approaching it and ways of not approaching it. And I know that you've shared with me, one of the first things that you really do when working with someone is to actually give them a bit of a reality check and a document that they can work through and say, hey, hold on a minute, is this really what you want to do? Before you go down that rabbit hole, why don't you reconsider? Why don't you reconsider your life 5 years from now, 10 years from now? But I think the other reality as well is the fact that it takes two to tango. It always takes two. I mean, you cannot keep a relationship together if both parties doesn't want it to go ahead. And I mean, at Family Life, our slogan is helpful today, hopeful tomorrow. Like, no matter where you are in relationship, or having been in a relationship, or having, just entering into a new relationship, there's hope for tomorrow if you want it. And there's always grace for people that have maybe gone through a broken relationship and want to do things differently in their next relationship. There's always hope for. So now, our former director, who sadly passed away in 2018 with Family Life, he head up the organization for 25 years. Him and his wife, Nikki Bray. Now they Andy, what Andy actually openly shared at the weekend conference is how he had gone through a divorce with his first wife when he had some health issues, and she at that point decided, hey, this isn't what I signed up for. I didn't sign up in being in a marriage with someone that's going to be on dialysis every second day of his life. So at that stage, she said, hey, this is it. I'm out. And what an amazing story of how Andy actually ended up getting remarried and happily married until the day he unfortunately passed. And he also head up this marriage ministry called Family Life, which is now today alive and still going strong and impacting literally thousands of families around New Zealand.
Is that your wee man in the background?
Can you hear him? I think he's just woken up and he might be knocking on the door.
Yeah. It won't be much longer.
It won't be
much longer. Yeah, we can't. I'm surprised none of mine have walked past and pulled a face. Coming back to briefly, I will put it in the comments in our video. But I've got a should I stay or should I go workbook, which I can offer to everybody for free. I would love you all to stay in your relationships. Both of us would. So, and if we can be of any help in relation to what you're going through at the moment, do reach out to us. We're very experienced with relationships. We've been there and we are there, and we know how difficult it can be It can be at times in terms of struggles, particularly at the moment when the world is upside down and people are losing jobs, and the emotional side of it is just massive for people. Is there anything else that you'd like to add, Wynand?
Yeah, just talking about getting in touch and what people can do. Just during this time of lockdown, we realized that all married couples have some tension. Okay, I would be surprised if you came to me today and say, "Oh, we don't have any tension in our relationship." So the natural rhythm of just getting up and going to work often gives a bit of room, a bit of breathing space for us to more easily cope and deal with that tension. Okay. Now, sometimes that only avoids the tension until it comes back up again. But we find ourselves in a reality at the moment where we're in each other's space 24/7. Okay. Now, for some of you with those unresolved challenges and tensions, that could be too much, and you might think this is it. But I want to encourage you today that it's not it. It doesn't have to be over unless you want it to be. And even if that's what you want, then I would encourage you to work through that document that Bridgette has compiled and ask yourself, who is the person I want to be in this relationship? But all of that being said, the team here at Family Life, we've actually made ourselves available for people to book some time to talk with us for free. We are a charitable trust, and so this was just a way that we've said, how can we serve our community during this time? Now, if you're needing some extra ongoing counseling, we could refer you to counselors. If that's required, but you can jump onto our website and book some time to speak with the team, just to help you get through this time of. It's often just good to have someone listen to what you're experiencing, because those are frustrations and they are real. And we have not by our own choice been forced into this confinement that most people find themselves in right now. So if that's of help, then definitely reach out.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you. Well, thank you very much for joining me today and really giving us some fundamental tools and to be able to use and utilize to ensure that our relationships are better going forward. And people definitely reach out to Family Life New Zealand. They can help you. I'm also happy to help you any way I can, or other professionals that you know that. But if you feel like your relationship needs to be reignited, then make an effort to do it, because at the end of the day, our relationships are the most important things in our lives, and the relationship, the intimate relationship that you have with someone is certainly got to be one of your top priorities. So I will put the link now to the Should I or Shouldn't I workbook. Feel free to download that. That's free, costs you nothing. And we look forward to chatting again and bringing and discussing with you some other topics in relation to your relationship. So everyone, have a fabulous weekend, and we will be on screen again shortly. Thanks.
That's great.
Thank you. Bye now.
Thanks,
Bye.
Bridgette.
Bye.
Bye for now.